the Bible, the story of God creating Adam and Eve is just a myth, and many of the facts of religious teachings don't stand up. Why should we believe a God or obey any church or biblical teachings?
The Bible wasn't ever put forward as an attempt at what modern cosmology is trying to give us. Right? It was never put forward as a literal attempt to describe how the world came about and what the periods were and what followed what. It is, if you like, a myth, a legend. It's a story, and this story is actually very profound. But it was never understood simply as a, as it were, replacement for scientific theory. So, as you know, in the Catholic Church, there's Mrs. Augustine and others. There's been this idea that there's a literal meaning, there's the metaphorical meaning, the spiritual meaning connecting to other things, the typological meaning, and so on. How we think of Christ is in a certain way. Sacrifice of Christ, repeating the sacrifice of Abraham and Isaac and so on. All these different meanings are there. And if you read the Bible in that spirit, there's something very particular among world religions. I mean, this is common, of course, to Islam and Judaism as well as Christianity, is something very special in relation to all world religions, because it's trying to tell a story of how human beings grew in response to God. And there was a call from God, and the response grew. And in terms of what we call the Old Testament at the beginning, the Hebrew people thought that this is our God. They were living in a world where every people thought, we have our God. We're related to this God, and you're related to that God. And this relationship turned out to be different. But at first it wasn't clear how different it was, right? It was just, so that even the very idea of idolatry, for instance, if you take that in the Hebrew Bible, it evolved. In the early forms, there's no question of denying the existence of other gods. It's a question of whether you are loyal exclusively to Yahweh or you go after another god. It's rather analogous to adultery in marriage, because that kind of thing. I mean, the other woman or the other man exists, but you shouldn't be in this kind of relation with them. And then later on, you get an evolution in which you get the claim coming up that these other gods don't really exist, because they're simply made by human hands and they're not. Then again, what is it to be loyal to God and so on? You get creeping in with the prophets a sense of a higher way of being, of acting, of solidarity, of love for your fellow human being. And so we move along. So in a sense you have something which retains its whole story of how one gets to the highest understandings that we have of the faith today, the most deep, and there are many, because none of us totally understand it, but there are, the story of how we get there is very important to us to tell. That's why the Bible is so important to us. And this is not something you necessarily have in other kinds of religious tradition. In Buddhism, for instance, you have the teaching of the Buddha, and it's not told against the background of a story of gradually, the story, of course, of other seekers, other renouncers, as they call them, on which the Buddha listens to and then goes beyond. But that's not the essence of the story. In the Christian case, Jewish case, or Muslim case, the story is still very much there. And that fits with the understanding of faith as a journey. It fits because, in a certain sense, our faith as a journey, our faith journey, repeats, in a different way, but repeats or resonates with the various phases of that journey we're reading of the people of God in the Bible. Right? So it's another way of understanding faith as a journey, to understand it in relation to this big journey, the journey of the people of God from way back, right? And see how we can understand our biography in the light of that biography of a people. So the Bible is absolutely essential to the kind of faith that we have, we Jews, Muslims, Christians have. But it's a total travesty to think of it as a rule book or as a literal description of something that happened 7,000 years ago. And there's something very deeply pathetic about this because it's entirely derivative of modernity. If we hadn't had the modern scientific revolution, Galilean revolution, so no one would have ever thought of reading the Bible as a contribution to this kind of enterprise, right? It had to be, that kind of enterprise had to be there. And then you had to have it represented as a threat to the Christian faith for people to come back and say, no, we got the right, So they talk about creation science in the right-wing, American Christians and so on of that ilk. But they're in it. What's pathetic is that, real pathos in the sense that the claim is to go back to what it originally was, and what they're going back to never existed. What they're going back to, Augustine would think was, mad, and the opposers of the church would think were just crazy. So there's a terrible entrapment within this kind of modern worldview. In other words, the worldview of someone like Dawkins and the worldview of these biblical fundamentalists are very, very close to each other. That's why they can have such a, terrible knockdown, drag out, an angry fight. But there's the basis of this is a very deep misunderstanding of the whole tradition.